Good afternoon. Call to order our afternoon work session. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. 3 items on your agenda today, and like most work sessions, there's no specific action necessary. This is an opportunity for learning and feedback. 2 of the items are follow-ups from your retreat back in March, and 1 item is a follow-up from a previous council meeting. So the first is the topic of social equity, and before I invite the presenters to come forward, I just want to take a moment to recognize and say thank you both to the council for this topic as well as the staff work that has gone into this discussion. One of the things that we've talked about as we've grappled with the questions associated with equity, and a lot of other cities across the country continue to look at this, is that definition. What are we really talking about? And so one of the things I think is going to be really helpful today is to kind of try to get our arms around that a little bit. But because of that, as I've mentioned to you, we have lots of different folks in the organization that work on this topic. It's not one person in one department or one office that, you know, that person is totally responsible for equity. I believe that it's a value construct that goes across the entire organization. So different elements have different responses and different components. So whichever component or element that you want to most talk about, if you want to proceed going forward, then that focuses the attention in that particular area. But at the end of the day, it's a team. It's across the organization. It's across different disciplines. So to that point, we have 3 presenters today associated with social equity coming at it from different elements. And so this is a joint presentation. And that's why I wanted to talk about why you're going to see 3 people. It's because it's a topic that is, permeates a lot of different things. So Audria Caesar is here from Housing and Neighborhoods. Will kick us off, and then she'll turn it over to Megan Anderson for sustainability, and then Veronica Creech from economic development.
And before you start, Councilman Thompson and the mayor are excused.
Good afternoon, members of council. I am extremely excited to share information about equity today. And as the manager has just mentioned, this is a team effort. So I do want to introduce the team that will be presenting to you. We've got Megan Anderson and also Veronica Creech, and they represent sustainability and economic development, and I'm with human relations. So you're gonna get that different perspective today with the presentation. In thinking about how we wanted to kick this off, we thought about the complexity of the term and how people have different understandings of the meanings. So here's the agenda. We're going to give you some equity-related definitions. We're going to give you some examples of Raleigh and also talk about strategic planning using a framework. And then we're going to have an example of how you can use equity through equitable economic development. So before I get into the presentation, I do want to say it was important for us to think about how we can get the voice of the community. So in order to elevate the voice of the community, we chose to do a video. So I have a video that I want to share with you all. We literally found people on the streets of Raleigh and said, what does equity mean to you? So I think you'll enjoy this. Let me pause it.
Need to make sure that.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Marquita Mbonu with Raleigh Human Relations, and we're hitting the streets asking Raleigh residents how they define equity and what can the city do.
Equity to me is people coming from same places but having different opportunities.
Providing opportunities or services so that they can be enjoyed by all. And some folks may need some extra help in order to equally benefit.
When you can help uplift somebody and maybe give them some more advantages than somebody else who already has the means.
Then I think about impact, because once people have information, how does it impact their community? How does it impact their daily lives?
We don't grow up with the same backgrounds, we don't grow up with the same experiences, and so we're not the same.
Making sure that everyone is treated equally and without discrimination.
I define equity as making sure that everyone has equal opportunity for fairness and accessibility.
Well, first of all, I think there can be no equity without integrity. If you're trying to be equitable for all, then you need to be somebody that really loves humanity. You love yourself, put God first.
Yo diría que es el rol que tiene la administración pública de traer justicia e igualdad.
If I'm running a race with you and you're starting 4 yards back from me and I'm starting up here, but the finish line's the same place for both of us, I don't think we have equity.
We need to make sure that we have affordable housing, to make sure that people with lower economic means aren't driven from the downtown area.
Just giving people the opportunity to give their feedback of what they actually think they need.
Be more out in the streets, seeing what's going on.
Put some sort of regulations on this lot of land. Should be, if you're going to build some sort of housing on it, there should be some sort of stipulation that X amount of it should be some sort of affordable housing. For it can't just be $1 million condos.
I think one big thing the city can do is work on affordable housing.
The city needs to make every decision looking back at the last 7 generations and forward to the next 7 generations.
More young people in the new generation use more social media and platforms like that.
Better transportation system for people who don't live on bus lines, people who don't have Uber fare. Like more along the lines of helping a little guy.
Having safe spaces where people feel like they're welcome.
It could reach out to hire more disabled persons.
I like how I'm seeing the different playgrounds for special needs children pop up so that all children can go and have a good time. And I would like to see more of that.
I think maybe like starting small, like with the kids, the opportunities and the same level as other people have. 20 years from now, we would definitely see a huge difference.
I think offering tax incentives for businesses to move into areas where they're not as well developed.
The city can do what you are doing. I'm impressed.
Porque con las redes sociales se puede usar el lenguaje de la comunidad, o sea, de familias de inmigrantes, de cualquier país que sea, fe, grupos sociales, aún la comunidad, donde las comunidades pueden ir y expresar sus preocupaciones.
Just bringing more people together, things for little kids so they don't feel left out.
Reaching across the table to understand. We say a lot of times, if you could just walk in my shoes. When we have understanding, then we can make better informed decisions that really put ourselves in the seat of the lives that our citizens are living.
Okay, so we've heard from the community, representation from all districts on what equity is and how we can use it to move the city forward. The question that we need to ask ourselves is, with all the growth that we're seeing, and let me hit my F5, excuse me. With all the growth that we're seeing, how can we strengthen Raleigh so that everyone has an opportunity to thrive? And the answer to that question is equity. All right, so you've seen this picture or other variations of this image, and it shows that equality does not equal equity. In the first image under equality, everybody has one box. So it doesn't matter where you start in life, you get one box. With equity, you see you're given boxes according to what you need. And that's how we can begin to think about this term equity. Equality is the same. Everybody gets the same. So if I gave everybody a pair of shoes and they were all size 8 men's shoes, that wouldn't fit everybody. But if I gave each of you a pair of shoes in your own size, that's equity. These terms are often used interchangeably, but the difference is sameness is equality. Equality is great, but it doesn't equal equity. Equity is what moves us forward as a city. Now, the disparity is just a measurable difference in the outcomes for populations. So we talk about disparities in health And most recently, you've seen disparities in income, as highlighted in the New York Times article that we've seen on housing. Certain groups have 50% more wealth than other groups. So it's important to look at that and to consider that when you're creating a plan or utilizing a framework to move the city forward. In this image, you see three terms: health equity, social equity, and then equity. What this diagram is illustrating is that you can't have one without the other. Health equity is obtaining the highest level of health for all people. So it's about where you live, where you work, what you eat, what you have access to, healthcare. And really, social equity came about as, I would say, I don't want to call it a side effect, but it came about because of health reform. Back in the 20s, when there was tenement housing, they didn't have sanitation laws. And so it became a human rights issue to have good health. People felt like we should have access to a healthy place to live. And from there, social reform came about. So when I see those two terms, I think that they are married. And in this definition of equity, you must have both. In order to have a healthy, thriving Raleigh, you must have equity. Social determinants of health. This is a model that the CDC and World Health Organization use, but it just highlights the circumstances in which people are born into, where they live, where they work, where they age. Now, these circumstances are shaped by a wider set of forces: economics, social policies, and politics. So if I live on one part of town, my experience might be very different than if I lived somewhere else in Raleigh. So considering all of these factors is extremely important. Diversity is just about recognizing and celebrating the range of human differences and qualities. We all have some type of difference. As you heard in the video, we're all different. We grew up differently, we have different backgrounds, we have different understandings, we have different levels of education. So that informs our decision making and how we see the world. Diversity is important, and what you'll learn from the corporate culture is that they feel like diversity is their secret weapon. It is the secret weapon because they outperform the competition because they're thinking differently. As our community continues to change, we need to be thinking differently and to utilize diversity as our secret weapon. Inclusion is another term that people are confused about when it comes to diversity and inclusion. Is it both? Is it one? The picture on the left says diversity. You see you have a diverse group of people from different backgrounds. They're all together. It's diverse. The difference between that and the second picture represents inclusion. Everybody's at the table. Everybody has a voice. That's the difference. The moment of truth. I attended a conference with Dr. Linda Selene, and she just rocked my world with this moment of truth, so I'm going to share it with you all. And it talks about my truth, your truth, the truth as we knew it then, and the truth as we know it today. So what does all of that mean? My truth is my worldview. It's how I see the world. It's how I engage with the world based upon my experiences, my family, and my upbringing. Your truth is the same for you. The truth is floating somewhere in between that. The truth as we knew it then is like prior to the women's suffrage movement in the 1920s, women could not vote. That was the truth then. The truth as we know it today is I cast my ballot every election day. So another example of that is in terms of racial segregation. There used to be water fountains for white people, and it was termed colored back in the day. That's the truth as we knew it then, but that's not today. Another example is with the American presidency. At one point, I would say back in 2007, which wasn't too long ago, there's a lot of people who thought that they would never see an African-American president. But the truth is today, that has come and passed. So when we're making decisions, We need to consider the past, just as someone said in the video, but we should be thinking differently to move forward. Implicit bias. This is simply unconscious bias. As we talked about our truths and as we move in our personal authenticity, it's more about things that we think we know but don't really know. See, if it's unconscious, it means that I'm not aware. I'm not aware that I have these feelings. I'm not aware that I have these thoughts. And the problem with that is, when it comes to decision making, I'm thinking from my lens only. So what's important to take away from this is, even though we all have biases, regardless of who we are, where we come from, we all have biases, I need to start listening for understanding. Once I have understanding, then I can capture my thoughts and ask the question, why? I become more curious about, why is this a concern? Why is this an issue? If I choose not to capture that thought, it becomes a suppressed thought. Implicit bias is different from suppressed thought. Suppressed thought is, well, I know, but I'm just not going to acknowledge. So I want to spend just a couple of seconds sharing some ways that Raleigh is already utilizing equity in programming. First off, Council, you're giving $4.8 million in grants to nonprofits, which is a great thing. Parks and Recreation Department, our Parks and Recreation Department has implemented a trauma-informed approach to their curriculum and programming. That's huge. What that says is, if a child comes to me presenting with an issue or a concern, instead of casting that child out, we're going to work with them and give them approaches that might help them or might help them deal with their situation. Trauma is very common in society, but it's one of those things that people don't talk about. So the fact that they're taking this inclusive approach to consider children who may have endured something is powerful. Our transportation department just completed an accessible parking pilot study. What that says is we value accessibility for our residents, and we want to see where the highest areas of utilization are so that we can provide more accessible parking if it lends it to that. And then our digital connectors. We're essentially bringing technology to the community and engaging them in civic engagement at the same time, which is powerful. There's an assumption that everybody has access and everybody has the internet and everybody can code and everybody can utilize technology, but the truth is there are a lot of folks out there who don't. So this program is essential. So there's some opportunities. Megan's going to talk more about strategic planning and an equity framework, but I just want to point out two things that we can do. One is start with an equity impact assessment. That will at least give us a baseline of understanding. Build organizational capacity. Let's start talking about equity and using the same language together as we move forward with planning. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who's going to talk about the equity framework.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Oops, sorry, Mayor's not here. Too used to saying that. So I just wanted to pause for a second before I get started. And, you know, she gave a really great example of kind of the funnel of where we start with equity, all the different definitions. I'm bringing it a little bit further to talk about what does this look like in Raleigh, give some examples of some definitions, and then also what would an equity framework look like in general for cities and what might it look like in Raleigh. And then Veronica will make that funnel kind of go down and then show, oh, okay, well, here's how one department's actually doing that work. So I wanted to take just a few minutes here to get started and talk about why use an equity framework in general. Why do cities do this? So to get started, when you look at data, there are differences in demographics showing large gaps in the quality of life outcomes for residents. And these differences could include, as Audrey mentioned, race, gender, disability, age, income levels, and other things. And as Audrey displayed in one of the slides with the people picking apples, using an equity framework can help us uncover how we can provide equitable services to residents with different needs and backgrounds. So data shows that some residents are not being provided the same opportunities across several systems. Over the course of their lives, this can greatly reduce their overall economic and quality of life potential. The systems and structures that make up our lives, which include our government system, the healthcare, financial, education, transportation, job market systems, and many more, have been designed and rely on processes that maintain the status quo. These systems are all complex and interconnected and all play an important role in our quality of life. So the way these systems are designed can lead to advantages for some groups and disadvantages to others. So as Audrey mentioned, with the definition of implicit bias, many decisions on how we provide services and the outcomes to residents are somewhat invisible, and we can cause unintentional negative consequences for some groups of residents. But we can uncover and address these unintentional negative consequences by using an equity framework to build programs so that services can be provided more equitably. So in the next few slides, I'll show you some examples of outcome data for Raleigh and the region. And if we can look at outcome data over time and use an equity framework to build our programs to address the disparities for those worst off groups, we are building better programs that benefit all people. A key thing to remember is that an equity framework is not targeting just those worst off groups. Instead, by addressing the outcomes for those worst off groups, we can design better programs that benefit everyone, and we're all better off. So with that, here's a great example of how we're all better off. There was an equitable growth profile study done on our Triangle region by PolicyLink in 2012. It gathered data across several different quality of life systems in the 13 counties of the Triangle. And one of their key findings included economic consequences of inequities for all residents. The profile found that if there were no racial gaps and disparities in income, and if each racial group had the same average income and working hours as white residents, the region's gross domestic product would have been increased by 19%, and our GDP would have been $21.8 billion higher in 2012. Overall, inequities hinder economic progress for the entire community, and these inequities not only affect those worst off groups, they can negatively affect outcomes for all of us. So this is from the same equitable growth profile study. The diversity of the Triangle region will continue to rise in every county. By 2040, 2/3 of the Triangle region population will live in counties that are majority people of color. This includes Wake County becoming a majority people of color. As we look at outcomes of different residents, the need to provide equitable services to people from all different needs and backgrounds continues to increase. So this data shows that the middle class income levels in the Triangle region are shrinking, meaning there are a growing number of households in the lower income status and a decreasing number of upper income households. With that growing number of lower income households, communities of color are being affected at a much higher rate than white households. For example, within those communities of color, the Latino population experienced the biggest losses in the upper income status while also experiencing the highest rate of growth in the lower income status. This information shows that unemployment decreases for Triangle residents as they gain higher levels of education. However, the data shows that Black residents have the highest unemployment rates across all levels of education. And when segmenting this data by gender and race, women of color have the highest rates of unemployment no matter what education level they obtain. Here's some data from our City of Raleigh Community Survey. Respondents were asked to rate the availability of job opportunities. When looking at the overall data, the numbers look very good for our overall community at first glance. It seems there are plenty of jobs matching skills for our residents. But when you segment the data out by gender and race, residents responded very differently. The data shows that females gave lower ratings than males for being able to find jobs that match their skills. And Black and African American residents gave much lower ratings than white respondents. One final data example shows the complexity of this issue. Council has seen this before. We track the life expectancy by zip code metric in our strategic plan. There is a 13-year life expectancy difference between people living in different parts of Raleigh. We would need to break this down into several other metrics to figure out what is going on, but as mentioned previously, if we look at outcomes across several different systems, we see that residents don't have the same quality of life outcomes. So now I'll give a bit more information about what using an equity lens might look like for a city. A common best practice equity framework comes from the national organization called the Government Alliance on Race and Equity that you've heard of before. Many of the cities across the country are members of this organization, and they use their tools and resources to create their own versions of equity frameworks for their city. Within the 6 critical strategies that cities use to build an equity lens, using an equity framework is the first one there. And in addition, there are best practices for implementation, which include those listed in the picture: accountability, engagement, tools and infrastructure, and using data to make decisions. So in the coming slides, I'll present a few specific examples that will give council some ideas on how the city might approach using these strategies and best practices to address equity. So here I wanted to quickly share a simple cyclical model from GARE about how cities embed this work into their operations. As we mentioned, this is a complex subject, and this model is a continuous process that they use over time to normalize equity, organize equity, and operationalize equity into their processes. For normalizing, this involves building a shared understanding and definitions for equity, as Audrey mentioned, and coming up with priorities to tackle this work. For organizing, this involves creating an internal infrastructure to do this work, as well as working with our key partners and stakeholders. And I'll have some other slides about how the strategic plan may be a good starting point for this work. And then operationalizing involves using equity tools and collecting data that helps us develop strategies that drive results and better outcomes for residents. So where are we currently in Raleigh? If you look at cities on a continuum of time doing equity work, many start with individual departments trying to address equity through some of their programs. And then cities move towards a more institutional and structural focus by creating an equity framework with common goals and definitions that can be used in all city processes. For Raleigh, over on the left here on the continuum, at the individual department focus, we have many examples of departments taking the initiative to address equity with specific programs in their departments. Audrey mentioned some great ones earlier. Some others include just the meeting held last week with Planning and Transportation, where they're looking at more equitable transportation and affordable housing options, to our digital connectors, summer youth employment, to a focus on equitable economic development that Veronica's going to share with you. The city has also taken a few initial steps at the institutional level by becoming a member of GARE and doing some introductory training for equity with leadership a few years ago. We've also taken steps to prioritize MWBEs and city contracts. If council would like to move towards a more citywide focus on the continuum, there are opportunities to integrate equity more intentionally and in a way that will build it into our city processes. Currently, equity is not explicitly integrated into the City of Raleigh strategic plan or comprehensive plan, and we do not have city equity policy or common equity definitions and a framework for staff to follow. Having those definitions, training staff, and creating a framework is how many cities start to move this work from departmental specific examples to operationalizing and embedding this work into the organization. So here are some examples of how we might start to embed this work. In speaking with Monica Chaparro, who leads our strategic planning and departmental business planning efforts for the city, I wanted to share a few quick examples of how council could start to build an equity lens across the organization. One example would be to ask all city departments to identify one or more policies or processes in their departmental business plans to use an equity tool. That's similar to something that St. Paul, Minnesota does. Another would be to ask departmental budget planning or departmental budget funding requests to be examined through an equity lens similar to what City of Seattle does. In order to do these things, we would need to use data to make decisions, and I'll give a few quick examples of where we could start. So in our strategic plan and business plans, the city tracks data such as our racially concentrated areas of poverty and also life expectancy by zip code that we talked about. Performance measures such as these could be a start in assessing those equity factors. In addition, staff could look at existing performance measures and segment the data to further understand the outcomes for residents in Raleigh. As mentioned earlier, this may include segmenting by income level, age, disability, gender, race, and more. Monica also found some examples where cities have created an equity index that tracks data across several specific outcomes to address equity. And on that note, we are lucky enough to have great partners like Wake County, who have started tracking data with their social vulnerability index that would give us a great starting point for that kind of work. And now I'm going to hand it over to Veronica Creech, and she's going to give you a quick example of how one department has started to focus on equity in the way they approach their work, including layering it into departmental business plans and strategic plans. And after she presents that, I'll share an overview of equity opportunities that council may want to consider.
Thank you, Audria and Megan. Mayor Pro Tem, Council, it's great to be in front of you on this wonderful topic. Just respecting time, I'm going to go really quick, but you'll get it. So one thing that we do in our department to make sure we're working from a place of equity is we work with national thought leaders. That's what's on your screen here. There are folks who are guiding the way with equitable economic development. We have set a vision that includes all. We have, for the vision for our office is prosperity for all, and in our office we work with this definition of equitable economic development. We're guided by the 13 building blocks of economic mobility. You've heard me say it before, economic development starts at birth, and research has shown when the 13 building blocks of economic mobility are supported in a community, individuals show up more prepared to participate in the economy. The city of Raleigh can influence many of the building blocks, including community building, criminal justice and safety, and housing, while many other building blocks are more supported by area partners, including the county, the public education system, and nonprofits. In talking about partners, Wake County has gone ahead and taken the lead in mapping more than 250 organizations that build the scaffolding under those 13 building blocks of economic mobility. So we know who's working in each of those areas. Further, in our department at the Office of Economic Development and Innovation, we have memorialized our commitment to equity in our departmental business plan. So under your leadership and vision for economic development in the city, equitable economic development is prioritized in our business plan, where we're working with the city's strategic planning team to find areas in the city's plan where equity is a measurable input and has measurable deliverables. I'll turn it back over to Megan.
All right, thanks, Veronica. So as we mentioned earlier, some of the best practices for implementing equity include accountability, engagement, tools and infrastructure, and data. So here's just some examples of some opportunities that council may want to consider. With accountability, council could start by asking staff to address equity through the strategic plan and business plans, as mentioned. Longer term, we could also more explicitly embed equity into our comprehensive plan. Externally, council could ask that staff more explicitly ask that all partners we provide grants to show equity impacts directly through their programs that we fund. With engagement, it's foundational as a first step to provide equity training and understanding to all staff in the city so that we can build a shared understanding and common language for what equity means to the city and how to use an equity framework and equity tools as staff provide services to all residents. Externally, the city is already working on adopting more equitable processes for engagement through best practices such as the International Association for Public Participation model that Housing and Neighborhoods is leading and others are adopting. Leveraging more equitable outreach to a wider group of partners and residents is really important for us to kind of pay attention to as we work on this. So with tools and infrastructure, as mentioned, the staff training on equity and how to use equity tools is foundational to build the framework. And then externally, there is an opportunity to provide our city services more equitably as departments apply that equity tool to their planning processes. And finally, with data, as mentioned, we can start by layering and segmenting equity data into our strategic plan and other data sets so that we have more information needed to use an equity tool and make more informed decisions. There may be other opportunities, such as the example of an equity index or equity growth profile, where the city more closely tracks and reports out quality of life data related to equity for Raleigh. And this would be something that we most likely want to look to partner with other organizations, as Audria and Veronica mentioned, like the county, GARE, PolicyLink, or others as well. And so with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Audria, and she'll give you a final summary.
Okay, we threw a lot of information at you in a very short amount of time. But in summary, this is complex. There's a lot more we could have shared with you today, but we pared it down just so you can have the baseline understanding of where we could start. Equity is multifaceted, and it requires a plan. So Megan provided you with a framework that could be a way for us to start, along with some examples of what other cities have done. And then you saw an example applied through economic development. So we are seeking guidance from you all in order to prioritize this work moving forward. So at this time, we will take any questions that you all have.
First, I want to say thank you. Thank you to the three of you and everyone else that helped and participated in this. We see, I go back to the best practices approach over time, where we talk about individually in our agency focus, which lists our sample programs, and we see where we've been working and trying to be intentional, but there's so much more I feel we have to do. Not just need, but have to, and that really takes us to, as a council, working on that equity policy and setting the common equity goals and definitions. We have to. We're at this point in life where I think it's required. And I definitely, before I say any more, I want to let other council members have a chance, because I think sometimes I tend to get them to say ditto, and I at least want to hear their thoughts on this subject.
I love this so much. It's definitely a lot to kind of comprehend in terms of how we move forward and next steps as such a big organization. I'm kind of drawn to this piece around accountability, personally, both because I think it's something we can grapple with here at the table and help provide better direction in terms of weaving equity and a framework into our plans, into the strategic plan. I'm quite interested, I'm seeing this in other sectors as well, working in the nonprofit sector, where we've kind of gone back and forth between having one person own equity and then moving kind of evolving to understand that equity needs to be held with throughout the entire organization. And I'm even seeing just now in the past couple of years or past year, there be this, actually it's not either or, it's and, right? So we need and someone who can hold equity and constantly be thinking about it, and we need it to be weaved into everything we're doing. So that's kind of where I'm at in my thinking, wanting to see it kind of weaved throughout our plans, thinking about who does hold it for the City of Raleigh organization as a whole, in addition to the incredible work that y'all and others are already doing. So I don't know where that leads us, but rambling thoughts.
So I guess we're at next steps, and my next steps is, I'm thinking, if no one objects, is let's move forward in developing this plan. The best time to start the heavy lifting is now. Really, it was yesterday. I think.
You mean in terms of our strategic plan?
Yeah.
Incorporated within the strategic plan?
Incorporating into our strategic plan, I think departmental business plans and the comp plan as well.
I was going to say we need to definitely.
It needs to be everywhere. We have to be intentional. You care when you're intentional. And for us to really show the citizens that as a council we care, as a city we care, we have to be more intentional. And also telling the story of what we have out there. As we were sitting here, I was thinking about the request where we asked for a disparity study as well. But this takes, that's the real big heavy lift. This is the now. And as we work in parallel, as we develop programs and things, you don't know your gaps until you pull back the sheets. And I think we have to really expose everything and move forward.
Do you all have an idea of where you think initially across the board of the strategic plan as well as the business development plan or comprehensive plan? Can we do those as an integrated force all at one time, or do we need to stage it? What's your thoughts about that as far as a framework?
Well, you know, initially, I'd like to begin with an assessment, always an assessment to see where we are and see where those gaps are. There's a lot of data out there, as Megan shared. And then from there, I think we would be in a position to prioritize certain areas going back to the strategic planning process.
I like that answer, assessment.
Along those lines, I would like to see an assessment about finding the gaps between what skills people have versus the jobs that are available in the city. And then we can look at in terms of the kinds of jobs that we want to attract to the city in the future.
We anticipated you were going to ask that, so the next presentation, we're going to take that head on.
I think that also goes to our Pathway Center. And as we're working to build those relationships and we talk about job training, having that data and that information helps us develop that to be more intentional in everything. So those are definitely what I think we said move forth. Other than that, is there anything else you need from us? Like, I know we need to develop a plan and we need to probably have more meetings on how we intertwine, how we update our strategic plan with these new goals.
Well, certainly your feedback is important. We can bring back more specifics on how we would roll that out. I think what we're hearing is proceed with the framework within the construct of our existing instruments and maximize what we have. I think the assessment piece is also really critical to support that point, but that we also won't stop waiting for the assessment. In other words, we have a process when we go through the development of a business plan, development of the strategic plan. Next year is your refresh on the strategic plan. So we're hearing your feedback is we'd like to have this as a key element. So we're taking that direction and we can incorporate that. So we're hearing maximize the framework of this topic within what we use. That's what I'm hearing. I don't know if others are hearing something.
I mean, definitely, and I pray the business community is hearing that too as they submit to these RFPs.
And then the accountability piece, which was in the first part, is also trying to see where we can put those pieces of evaluation of how we interact with various applications or things like that. So we owe you something back, but we're hearing it within the framework of what the staff has presented.
Right.
I want to defer to the team to make sure I said that correctly, if that's what you're hearing as well.
And if you discover something new, do not be afraid to let us know and bring it.
Let me just offer my general comments. Thank you all so much for all this work. You know, I was involved in the crafting of our comprehensive plan back in 2009, and it was about this three-legged stool of sustainability, and the equitable social equity part of it always seems like it's been the most difficult one, but over time it does appear like the most progressive and competitive cities have come to realize that if all of their citizens aren't active participants in contributing to our prosperity, then we won't succeed and we won't be able to compete economically. And so it's just seems like a huge opportunity for us to say, okay, this is morally the right thing, it's ethically the right thing to do, but it's also the opportunity for us to have a city where everyone has the same opportunities to achieve their goals in life and to prosper and to and contribute to our success. And so I appreciate all the hard work you've done on this. It seems like most folks do begin with an assessment. Let's find out, let's inventory all the great things we're doing. Let's find where the gaps are. Let's study those disparities. Let's use data so we can really have strong underpinning for our conclusions about why we're doing what we're doing and how it benefits the whole community and how it makes us a stronger city. So I really appreciate this effort, and I appreciate all the council's support.
Yeah, definitely, and I appreciate the council's continued support of, and I'm particularly pulling this out, the Raleigh Summer Youth Employment Program, and hopefully in next year's budget we can fund some more spaces. Thank you.
Thank you guys for the presentation.
All right, thank you. I think Veronica, you're next.
Yes, we're going to keep going. Okay.
This, as a reminder, this topic also came from your retreat. You had several groups of questions around economic development and small business, so rather than long narratives in writing, we figured a presentation would be more effective.
Great.
And we like videos.
We're going to start with a quick team introduction. We've had some changes on the team since we were last before you. So as a reminder, I'm Veronica Creech. I head up the Office of Economic Development and Innovation. I have been with the city 1 year today.
Congratulations.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Hi, I'm Amanda Driscoll. I've been with the city for just short of 11 years, and I lead the administrative functions of our office and provide communication support.
Cool, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tiffany McNeil. I've been with the city for about 2.5 years, and I'm the Business Retention and Expansion Manager.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Rafael Baptiste. I've been with the city for almost 2 years. I've been in economic development innovation for all of almost 2 days now, and I am your brand new Senior Manager for Community Economic Development. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Jen Bozer with the Office of Economic Development and Innovation, and I am the Senior Expansion and Retention Manager for that office.
Right,
And I've been here almost 3 years.
And again, just respecting time, we're going to jump right into our presentation. Just going to scroll down there. So I talked about the building blocks of economic mobility, and from your council retreat recently, you had some real specific questions around workforce development. Councilman Cox, you just asked something as well around skills and skill gaps and how we're learning about that. And then you had some direct questions around small business support. You had asked about how do we help small businesses with their business plans and financing. When we look at the 13 building blocks of economic mobility, those questions fall under employment and training, and wages, supplements, and workforce support. I'm going to invite Jen to come lead the conversation with workforce development, and then Tiffany will follow up with small business support.
So thank you for having us today. Just wanted to respond that the workforce work in the strategic plan really started with a regional workforce survey, which really identifies 10 industry clusters, the skills gaps, the areas where companies are successful in hiring employees, and job growth. And so we're happy to share that again with you, but I think that's really answers your question, Councilmember Cox, in terms of a baseline of knowing where we are. And we plan to continue that survey, update it, because it is a 3-year data set. So we're looking at another partnership to update that survey very soon. So I'm here today to address 2 questions that Council had related to what can we do to help companies that receive incentives hire locally, and what incentives and programs exist to support individuals with barriers to entry to achieve gainful employment. So I'd like to start with the first questions. What can we do to help companies that receive incentives locally? Oh, okay. I always mess up here. So when a new company is considering a decision to locate or expand, there's significant consideration given to their ability to find talent. It's not only finding talent, it's hiring, it's retaining, it's training. All projects come with different circumstances, And in terms of the number of jobs, types of position, the nature of their decision, whether it be a consolidation, relocation, new operation, or expansion in our market, that kind of determines what their talent needs will be. Each state, county, and city has different ways in how they can support companies to hire locally. And at the City of Raleigh, we have some unique attributes that provide companies with a competitive advantage to enable them to hire and train talent from the local market. So the slide in front of you is sort of give you a baseline of the labor market that we pull from. This is a sort of incredible map to show you that there's a number of people that drive into Wake County and the city every day. Not every map in the United States looks this way when you look at communities. Some communities have labor markets that are very driven by geographic lines. That's not the case for us. So as many people drive into Raleigh as drive out for jobs in our marketplace. And that can be a positive as well. So we have about 67 new residents a day who are moving to Wake County. As companies grow, so does our population, which is also good because you're replenishing, more people to fill those jobs. 51% of our residents hold a bachelor's degree or higher. We have a very diverse economy with a convergence of industry clusters that complement one another, providing a strong talent pool for companies to recruit locally. We have a world-class education system, both the public schools, community colleges, and the college and university system, which provides us with a robust pipeline of candidates trained with skills in the region's industry sectors. And then, be remiss not mentioning Wake Tech. It's the largest community college in the state with annual enrollment of 75,000 students, and is an incredible partner in providing customized training to meet an employer's specific needs. So our best opportunity to help a company to achieve the benchmarks that they've set forward through the incentive process is to really to hire locally, is really to focus on some of the existing infrastructure that we have. And that's through a customized workforce strategy that includes local recruitment, external recruitment, workforce training, and partnerships with the public school system through apprenticeships, the community college, and the university system. What I'd like to talk about a little bit is to explain sort of the state and local workforce programs. So the bulk of services that we offer are through partnerships with the state's NC Works Career Center Network and our local workforce Capital Area Workforce Development Board and the community college system. These entities serve really as connectors between job seekers and employers. And at NC Works, there's over 100 career centers across the state. Many of the services that they provide are actually free to companies, and if sought in the private sector, would be at cost. Most folks don't know that, so that's something that we definitely explain to companies when they're coming into the community. They have access to an extensive network of recruiters and recruiting tools, online job portals, which actually feed into all the university campuses and community colleges. They coordinate job fairs and campus recruitment efforts. They can provide labor market data. They can do application screening, all free of charge. There also are a number of programs that companies can take advantage of that actually they can receive money, financing, funding through grants to offset the cost of training. And these are common programs that we offer as part of that incentive conversation to provide a customized workforce solution. Some of the programs include the North Carolina Community College Customized Training Program. In our community, it's delivered through Wake Tech, but they can basically take a customized program and either hire their own trainer or hire a trainer out and really make it special to their company. We have on-the-job training grants to compensate employees for wages paid during the on-the-job training for a set period of time, and the incumbent worker training grants, which provide up to $10,000 per grant to reimburse companies for the cost of training their workers. The second two can really be accessed at any given time in the process, so they don't have to be in an incentive process to access those. And an example is of how this has been applied is Emphasis is a company that was awarded an incentive grant to create 2,000 jobs in Raleigh in 2017. And as part of their incentive, they received a grant from the state for customized training to upskill new hires through a rigorous training program that they are putting together to really not only hire graduates from the universities and the community college, but also professionals who may want to transition their career. And that's a way that can be used. So the other program is apprenticeships and internships. And there are, these provide individuals with job training and classroom, sort of a combination of the two. They can start in the high schools. They can provide certifications or credentials for individuals that go through, and then usually a company is interested in hiring that person because they've had an experience with that individual in their workplace.
So, just quickly, so these training incentives, they're state funded?
So the customized training is through the state, North Carolina Community College. That is often one that you see as part of an incentive package for most of the companies that we offer. The on-the-job training and the incumbent worker training programs are both administered through the local workforce board. They can also be funding or financing, but they're not necessarily dependent on a company relocating or expanding.
But the source of funds is federal?
So that's where it gets a little bit tricky. There is something called the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act, which funnels money into the state, and then that money also funnels to the workforce boards. And I'm going to pass out. I forgot I had these. Thank you. I have a little bit of information on those programs, but WIOA is what it's called. It's a federal program that was introduced to really provide a system and strategy nationally on how those workforce dollars are used and applied.
So how does a business find out about these last two programs?
So we work very closely with Capital Area Workforce Development Board. In fact, we just had a meeting this week with a company, an existing industry, where we go out and as a team, we respond to their request for expansion and what kind of programs they can take advantage of. And through that process, introduce them to a number of resources that can help them create jobs, training, and then also the more traditional incentives based on what they have. It's really through the network of the economic development folks who know about companies that are growing or expanding. Capital Area also does industry roundtables. They have business forums in partnership with the chamber and other industry groups. So it's really about getting the word out.
Okay.
But I guess the other flip side of my question, so none of the training incentives are city funded?
None of the training incentives are city funded, that's correct, yes. But I would say that the programs that exist, they can be complex in terms of how to deliver the training, the reporting mechanism. And so I think it's really beneficial to have it as a package, as part of the full package of a grant incentive for a company. I know council favors when they have training grants. So, you know, we often look at multiple ways that we can help a company. And I don't think the company always realizes the benefit, especially if they're not from North Carolina, that the workforce training really can do for them, the customized training can do for them, until they get here and start talking to other companies who have experienced it. So those actually end up becoming some of the best programs that we have. So the next question that council had for us was, what initiatives and programs exist to support individuals with barriers to entry to achieve gainful employment? And council asked us specifically about justice involved and individuals that are in transitional living or homeless. So when we speak to support services for individuals with barriers to entry, there are a whole host of partners at the county, at the state, in the nonprofit community that provide programs and services to help individuals achieve economic mobility, career training, job placement. You heard me talk about NC Works and Capital Area Workforce Board and the Community College. These, once again, are really primary organizations to help individuals. So before I mentioned businesses, this is really on the individual side. So they really are the connection funnel between an employer and a job seeker and that training pipeline to get them to where they need to go. Their support is focused in two areas. So Capital Area really, and NC Works really focus in two areas. Adults is one area, and that usually consists of folks that are unemployed or underemployed and seeking employment or training. The other category is youth, ages 18 to 24, that are unemployed, underemployed, seeking employment or training, and that do not have their high school diploma or GED, or may be facing other barriers of entry that prevent them from finding gainful employment. Of the two categories, youth is probably the one that has the strongest need for resources. And there are enhanced programs to support individuals that have additional barriers to entry and specific funding mechanisms through the WIOA dollars and other grants that really focus on veterans, justice involved, and those are individuals with a felony or criminal background. Disconnected youth, that includes youth who may also experience poverty or other challenges, and people with disabilities. So NC Works and Capital Area and the Community College provide job readiness, employment training, and job placement. They work with the nonprofit community, Wake County Human Services, and the state to provide services specifically to individuals with specific needs. And these are often called wraparound services, and they can include housing, mental health, substance abuse, transportation, childcare, etc. Veronica, in her presentation, mentioned the mobility map that was done by Wake County. A number of those programs, in addition to the Wake County Human Services site, have these nonprofits listed that provide those programs and wraparound services. And so this is for adults. These are kind of the just a summary of some of the programs adults can take advantage of: career assessment, on-site and virtual workshops, career fairs and scholarships. And for youth, It could be dropout prevention, financial literacy, entrepreneurship skills, job training, work experience, just to name a few. The city is engaged in a number of initiatives and partnerships to help connect employers to open up opportunities for individuals with barriers to entry. And this work is a direct reflection of the strategic plan for economic development under Objective 1, focused on workforce. As noted earlier, with unemployment at 3.6%, companies are struggling to find the workforce they need. And there's greater opportunity for them to pursue non-traditional recruitment and hiring avenues. So it's really an opportunity for them to think outside of their traditional realm. In December 2018, some of the programs, I just want to mention some of the programs that we've supported that are touching this area. The City of Raleigh supported the first Hiring Well, Doing Good conference, which brought together over 20 nonprofits that support individuals with barriers to entry for a program featuring companies and organizations that have experience and success with hiring individuals with barriers to entry. And one of the panelists was our local restaurant, Carol's Kitchen. They inspire a world of second chances by providing healthy employment with women leaving crisis. In September 2017, the Pathway Center launched with a focus on offering workforce training programs to Raleigh residents. And under the leadership of the Department of Housing and Neighborhoods and the Pathway Center, the city supports a number of youth initiatives, including some that have already been mentioned today: Digital Connectors, our Raleigh Summer Youth Employment Program, Partnership Raleigh, Youth Build, and IT Beginnings. So the city is focused on that youth area, which is really the strongest need, in addition to the support that we provide the nonprofits, as mentioned earlier as well. So other ways that we're working in this space, you may remember last summer you gave us guidance to convert the Innovation Fund to the Impact Partner Grant program. And with the first round of recipients, we actually awarded those in January, and we have a number of them focused on programs to help individuals with barriers to entry. Tech Talent South focuses on individuals with autism. District C works with youth and underrepresented Raleigh-based entrepreneurs, and Bunker Labs works with veterans. So one of the key takeaways from the regional workforce survey completed by the city was that most employers are more likely to hire individuals via referrals and social networks. And so when we think about women, minorities, and members of the LGBT community, they also face barriers to entry. And the City of Raleigh partnered with the Chamber to host the first annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Forum with over 500 attendees, the majority from the private sector. That was impressive. We expected, I think, 150 to come to that event. So that just showed that there is interest and that it's important to companies. Shortly after this, through the support of the City of Raleigh, the Alliance was formed. And there is now a formal alliance that is focused on connecting employers with opportunities to diversify their workforce. Veronica Creech has a seat on the board of the DEI Alliance. So with that concludes my presentation, and I'll now turn it over to Tiffany McNeil, my colleague for small business.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having me here. I want to take the opportunity to speak with you how the City of Raleigh promotes the growth, sustainability, of small businesses in the community. And I will also address questions raised by council during the council retreat related to how small businesses receive help with the development of business plans, financing, budgeting, and seeking capital. So I think it's important that we start with how do we define small businesses. So census data tells us that in Wake County, more than 94% of the businesses employ 49 or less individuals. So the city has adopted this number as their definition for small businesses, and you'll see that we have incorporated that throughout our policies and programs. So to answer the question, how does the city support small businesses? We do that with our small business ecosystems. So technically, partnerships. Looking at our model here, you see that the key players are entrepreneurial organizations, colleges and universities, financial resource providers, nonprofit resource providers, and for-profits as well, and the government, the city. And we cannot leave out the small businesses themselves. So what does support look like? When we speak of supporting small businesses, we're talking about partnerships, providing forums, which are places for business resource providers and entrepreneurial supporters can come together to discuss key topics, bring thoughts and ideas, collaborations, and provide a platform for business education, and also technical assistance. So before I discuss the entrepreneurial organizations which are a part of the ecosystem, I want to talk to you a little bit about what that technical assistance looks like. So technical assistance can come in the form of business planning, which is business plan development, identifying markets, suppliers, distributors, helping these companies understand business license requirements and business forms, management assistance, which helps them know and identify how to manage and manage production and their staff. Also, with the City of Raleigh, the MBWE program, they help minority vendors with their certification with the city and also help them register to be historically underutilized businesses in the state of North Carolina. That's just an example of technical assistance, as well as financial administration that can be helping them learn how basic accounting concepts and help them understand how to budget. So kind of stepping back and taking a look into that model, that ecosystem, we'll start with the entrepreneurial organizations. And when we speak of entrepreneurial organizations, we're talking about accelerator programs and co-working spaces. So our accelerator programs are our cohort-based programs that provide seed investment, connections, mentorship, and educational opportunities for the individuals that participate in these programs. I'll identify just a couple. HQ Raleigh, which is a 6-month entrepreneurial program. Launch Raleigh, which is a 12-week business education program that provides business training, microloans, mentors, and networking opportunities to qualified individuals in Southeast Raleigh, North Carolina. This program started in January 2017. I think I had been on my job for 3 days when I went to the opening ceremony there. I'm proud to say since 2017, they have graduated 100 graduates out of the Southeast Raleigh-based program. And now this program has become the model for over 7 municipalities in Wake County. And since the inception of the program, the City of Raleigh's Office of Economic Innovation has been on the planning team, and we're getting prepared for the fall cohort, which will open up in August. So if anyone knows someone that's interested in applying, go to launchRaleigh.com. That's a plug. Anyway. Moving on just to talk a little bit about the co-working spaces. So co-working spaces provide a space for entrepreneurs and startup small business owners to collaborate. Let's say if you don't have an office space that you can afford, you can go to a co-working space low rent, networking opportunities. They provide a space for business education as well. One of the takeaways from the Innovation Summit that occurred in 2011 was that the City of Raleigh lacked co-working space. Fast forward to 2014, there was over 147,000 square feet of co-working space. We're proud to say today there's over nearly a half a million square feet of co-working space in Raleigh.
Do we know the occupancy rate of that space?
I'm sorry?
Do we know the occupancy rate of that space?
I don't have that at this time, but I think we could potentially survey to get an idea of what that would look like, what that is currently. Let me just note that. And we would have to reach out to our partners for that.
That's fair.
Okay. So some of those co-working spaces are HQ Raleigh. They now have 4 locations. Their most newest location is on Gateway, which is off of Capitol Boulevard. Industrious, which is downtown. Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center, which is a partnership between Shaw University and Carolina Small Business Development Fund. The loading dock, which is really unique because unlike some of the other spaces, it provides a space for light assembly, manufacturing, and office space as well. And with the assistance of the Build and Upfit grant, they were able to build out their space to provide that light assembly space. And also they now have a video and photography studio that can be rented by local artists who do not have a space at home. And the locality and the Pinkubator are women-owned co-working spaces that operate out of downtown. I'm sorry, Pinkubator is in North Hills. And most recently, WeWork opened on Glenwood Avenue. Looking further into our ecosystem, I would be remiss if I did not talk about how the colleges and universities contribute to the growth of small businesses in the community. North Carolina State University has been a catalyst for economic development, working with entrepreneurs through their entrepreneurship initiative, which supports entrepreneurship right here in Raleigh and also in the Triangle. Shaw University with the creation of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Center. St. Augustine's University with being involved in the first cohort of the Launch Raleigh Accelerator Program. Wake Tech Community College has been involved in the creation of the Black Momentum series, which I'll talk to you a little bit about later in the presentation, as well as being involved in Raleigh Small Business Connect. We want to mention here that we plan to explore additional partnerships with Campbell University and William Peace University. For example, exploring the ideas of an entrepreneurship law clinic with Campbell University. They've reached out to us and want to know how they can be involved in the business community, as well as exploring the opportunities to work with business students, parent business students, and small business owners at William Peace University. So this was one of the questions that was raised during the council retreat. How does the city assist small businesses with access to capital? If I could, give everybody some money, that would be really great, but I didn't win the lottery, so that's not gonna work. But, so one of the things that, as a city, one of the things that we do is we help small business owners identify financial resources on how they can access capital. That can be different ways. It can be through angel networks, banks and credit unions, community development financial institutions, which I want to take a minute just to highlight what we call the CDFIs here, those community development financial institutions, because they work to offer access to capital to underrepresented populations, such as people of color, women, and veteran small business owners. Other sources of capital include revolving loan funds and venture capital funds as well. Lastly, here we see grants, and I specifically listed that last because the City of Raleigh has adopted into its strategic plan Objective 3, which is to establish a strong economic development program which utilizes strategies and policies and a comprehensive toolkit of resources to help strengthen the business community in the city. So we call that the Economic Development Toolkit. The goals of the Economic Development Toolkit are to encourage economic prosperity and equity, support business growth and development, diversify our economy, and back to partnerships, we want to involve private sector, state, county, schools, and nonprofits to inform a clear policy, program, strategy, and guidance for staff and council, and also to promote a business-friendly environment. Within our toolkit, and I think we all are, you all are pretty informed about these programs, but I just want to highlight, we have the Impact Partner Grant, the Jobs Raleigh Grant, the Build and Upfit Grant, and the Facade Rehabilitation Grant. And all of these programs help support the growth and sustainability of small businesses in the city. And I'm moving on to forms. So if you think about, so in our strategic plan, one of our objectives is to cultivate an innovative and entrepreneurial culture based on shared strategic goals. And we do that through the creating of partnerships and identifying best practices that assist small, startup, and minority-owned businesses, business development, and education, which is done through our forums. To date, we have been involved with several forums through our partnerships with our organizations in our ecosystem. They consist of the Black Entrepreneurship Week. Black Entrepreneurship Week this year will be the 3rd annual event. It takes place September the 16th through the 20th, and I'll send out information and a manager's update for you all to be aware of that event coming up. The Black Momentum Series. This series is new. It actually was birthed through discussions with Southeast Raleigh business owners, and this is hosted by Wake Tech Small Business Center and the Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce. And the City of Raleigh's Office of Economic Development has been integral in developing content for these education sessions. They consist of anywhere from how to build partnerships and collaborations, how to use QuickBooks, how to use Lean Canva for graphics and design, how to network, how to use social media, how to develop your social media strategy. Also, I wanted to save this to last, but I will speak about it now. This is the Raleigh Small Business Connect. This is the 2nd year that the city has been basically hosted this event, working with partners such as Wake Tech Community College, the Greater Raleigh Chamber of Commerce, Raleigh SCORE, Carolina Small Business Development Fund, and also the Women's Business Center of North Carolina. This event, in its 2nd year, had over 400 attendees this year. 400 attendees, more than 30 business resource providers. This year was unique because there was a lunch panel discussion on innovation and business where local business owners participated and actually gave back to the community, providing their insight. The MWBE Small Biz Expo is in its 21st year, hosted by the City of Raleigh, working with the City of Raleigh's MWBE program and the Wake County Public School System. This gives minority vendors the opportunity to network and come together and find out opportunities for contract bids. National Small Business Week, which is the first week of May. This is the city's 2nd year celebrating National Small Business Week. We have integrated Raleigh Small Business Connect into that celebration, and we want to make that the staple event for National Small Business Week. And Women's Business Center of North Carolina Moving Forward Conference. Again, we've been, the city help host and help sponsor this event, and we were there providing information about the services that the city provides for small business owners. And this is our first year attending the National Business Council Conference. We were there providing information to small business owners about our programs, our services that we provide in the Office of Economic Development. I want to leave you with some small business accolades. So the lovely state of North Carolina in 2017 was voted best state to start a business. In August 2018, Raleigh was among the top 10 cities for small business friendliness. And in December 2018, Raleigh was the #3 best place in America for starting a business. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I'd just like to say thank you very much for all you're doing. I've had some very, very positive feedback from the 5 Points small business owners, and they've been very complimentary of you in particular and of our programs in general. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Definitely thank you. I have a couple questions. One of them is if 94% of our businesses are defined as small businesses because they have 49 or less employees, how do we prioritize? I don't think prioritize is the right word. How do we determine how resources are allocated? Because that number I'm sure is great, and I'm sure the resources aren't they're not where they need to be. So how's that handled? And what are the needs? Like as you're working with businesses and we have our programs and grant opportunities, some of them have been around for years, and we talk about having an equitable lens and moving forward. How are you all looking at how some of these programs may need to be even modified or even new programs so that we can, you know, really address the needs? Because the needs have changed over the last 10 years, and some of these programs have been around a lot longer than that. So
I will say definitely we're looking at that. We have a lens and we're looking at that, but I'll let Veronica add more. I will just add shortly, as you can see, as part of our economic development toolkit, for example, one of the objectives there is to be constantly evaluating that program. You might recall that we have come forward to you times before for policy recommendations.
Right.
That's a result of us looking at the programs, determining how are they really impacting our community, who's best benefiting from those programs. For example, Building Upfit Grant. Initially, when the Building Upfit Grant was approved, it was for a higher amount. $100,000 was the award. What we found was that wasn't really touching the community as it needs to be. We lowered that amount so that we could have a greater impact on the community and actually reach out to more people. But I will tell you, being boots on the ground, I see some of the things that people need is access to financial assistance with equipment, for example, inventory. So, you know, Veronica and I have been in discussions about what do people really need? Number one, how do we find out what they really need? So how do we survey? How do we get out there in the community? What are they telling us? What do they really need? And how do we look at the programs we have and identify what may not be working? And how can we shift those resources to other areas? And how can we partner with individuals that are already providing this work, but how can we partner with them to help them elevate the work that they're currently doing?
Okay. It definitely answers my question, and I think it, you know, what I'm hearing is there would be other opportunities of you coming before us with requests.
Yes.
And I think that definitely, you know, as a council, I know I'm open to it, and I think others are too, as, you know, information is provided and will help, you know, our managers and everyone find the resources to properly fund. Because one thing I don't want us to do is come up with a program for the sake of having a program. We need to have a program that's well resourced, even if it means, you know, partnerships with those resources. My other question is, and that question was on the employer side. Now my question is about the employee side, and I'm going to, I know he's here, and it's hopefully they hear this message as well in our communications department. When we look at opportunities for people to find employment, is there a way for us to leverage our community centers as far as providing information that people can touch, feel, and know what's available? Because I keep hearing people don't know jobs or companies, and maybe it's something that as we're modernizing our community centers, maybe with some electrical boards or displays, that we can try to find ways to be a resource out there. So I'm kind of dropping a seed, planting a plant for the experts to figure out, because you live this every day. But what I keep hearing is people don't know. And I think it's our job for us to come up with ways that people can't say they don't know.
That's great. Thank you for that recommendation and thought and planting those seeds. You will see some fruitfulness come back out of that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other?
Just one quick one. On the slide, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Slide for ED Toolkit grants, there's the first one, Impact Partner. And just like a little bit more, that's the one that I'm not as familiar with, who those grants are targeted at and what are the service that they provide.
Absolutely, if I can just share. As Jen pointed out, the Impact Partner Grant Program is the program formerly known as the Innovation Fund.
Okay.
So council was so forward thinking, realizing we need to invest in innovation, and then invited us to think about what could that look like. Absolutely risky for the city to invest in an individual startup or an individual innovation. How do we take that assessment on? So what we decided is to work with proven innovation efforts like HQ Raleigh, that list you saw of the innovation partners,
and so forth.
and that's where the Impact Partner concept came from. This will always be a legacy of Derek Miner, working through the innovation community, working with the innovation community, and we were able to ask them, the members of the innovation community, if the city supported innovation, what would that look like? Investing in accelerators, investing in tools, investing in organizations like Launch Raleigh, and you saw some that Jen listed, Bunker Labs, who are investing in veterans, right? So we could measure impact and come back to you with a scorecard with deliverables.
Okay. And are we still working with the county and on different opportunities as far as, economic vitality and things of that nature?
Always.
Okay.
Always.
I've got one other thing. I just want to say thank you so much for all of your work on this and all the work you do day in and day out. I think it really shows the city's commitment to helping our small business community and our business community generally. I'm hoping that you're also keeping your ears out for ways that the city might be hurting or affecting some of our small business owners. I'm hearing some things, and I'm just hoping that y'all will also flag that internally or with us, so we know if there are other barriers that we should be looking at outside of y'all's department. So just want to flag that. Yeah, thank you.
And we welcome that as well. If we can ever be a partner in navigating some of that with small businesses or businesses in general, we're happy to take that on and to help folks navigate the city's organizational systems as well.
Okay. One last thing, and it has to do with sharing information. Because I go here often, and I've seen information, but some of the information you presented today I wasn't aware of. Our website, Raleigh For You, if we can just make sure that it's current and up to date, and it also falls in line with our new internet policy, that would be great.
You're absolutely right. And do you want to speak to that?
I was going to say, we're actually in the process of integrating into the Raleigh NC.gov website.
Perfect.
Damien and his team are great. They're helping us literally migrate data, migrate images, and help us to get back in line with the branding. So that's absolutely underway right now.
Perfect. And we're not just saying that because he's standing up in the back of the room walking around. But thank you.
Good job.
All right. All right. Thank you for that. Next, we have our Raleigh Citizen Advisory Council Communication Support presentation.
As they're getting the materials ready, this is a reminder as a follow-up to the April 2nd council meeting where the council had asked for some additional comment to how to potentially support in a better fashion the RCAC groups. So there's two presenters today, Linda Jones from Community Engagement Division of Housing and Neighborhoods, as well as Damian Graham from our communications group.
Good afternoon, Mayor Pro Tem and members of council. Thank you for your time this afternoon. My name is Linda Graham Jones, and I am the Community Engagement Administrator in our Housing and Neighborhoods Department. And I want to share with you our relationship that we've been working with our RCAC and CAC in regards to communications. So just want to give you, it's going to be joint fold as Mr. Hall mentioned, so I'll give you the first in regards to our Neighborhood Services Division working with RCAC and CAC, and then Damien will conclude the presentation and will be available for questions at the end. So in regards to community engagement, for our specifically neighborhood services, we have 18 CACs that we support, and we have 6 full-time community relation analysts that support our 18 CACs, and then we have 1 community relations analyst senior that supports our RCAC. So community engagement services, what do we actually provide to our RCAC and to our CAC? This is a little wordy, so I just may go through it. So please feel free if you think I'm going too fast, but I don't want to, I do want to respect your time. So staff does serve, their main primary function is to serve as the liaison between each CAC and other City of Raleigh departments. Some of the tasks include, we assist in the development, print, and distribution of our 18 monthly communications via email and newsletters, and we do also include Gov Delivery. We provide information on rezoning and other community impact issues and assist in research and identifying resources to address the issues as needed. We identify and link neighborhood associations and other resources to the CAC. We also offer assistance for special projects such as neighborhood cleanups, community festivals, and other activities. We do speak before neighborhood groups to publicize available services and establish communication and a rapport between the community residents and the City of Raleigh. We also assist in the resolution of issues facing communities concerning housing, city services, property issues, and crime prevention. As I mentioned earlier, we do collaborate with other departments, but specifically we are in constant communication with our Raleigh Police Department, Planning, Parks and Recreation and Cultural Resources, and Development Services. These departments have standing reports at our monthly CAC meetings. We also organize and coordinate capacity building programs that target outreach, education, training, citizen involvement, leadership, and problem solving, such as, and most of you are aware of them, just want to highlight what we do here, our CAC Awareness Funds, our Citizen Leadership Academy, and our Raleigh Neighborhood College, which I do want to take this opportunity for thanking you for coming out to supporting those graduations. We also focus on our Hispanic, Latino initiatives, our annual neighborhood exchange, our neighborhood registry. We're up to over 350 registered neighborhoods currently, and our neighborhood improvement funds. So that brings us to working with RCAC and the communications request that they had at their retreat on February the 9th. That retreat was facilitated by Dr. Audrea Caesar, who she was up here earlier, our Executive Director of our Human Relations Commission. The RCAC was provided a communications plan template, which guided an organization through the creation of a communications plan based on goals and objectives. The template provided worksheets that help tailor messaging and identify the most appropriate communications channels, such as email, website, newsletter, radio, social media, to name a few. The RCAC members participated in practice activities to prepare them to execute the development of their plan. The next steps from that retreat was RCAC membership was to develop a plan, and staff would provide editing, printing, and distribution efforts. Community engagement was to publish also a CAC leadership guide to help new officers understand the task before them and to work successfully with the public, our division, and other City of Raleigh staff. And that RCAC leadership guide was consulted, RCAC was consulted on the input of the leadership guide. It has not been published yet, so we're still in draft form. And now I will turn the presentation over to Damien.
Thank you, Linda. Hello.
Hey.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. My name is Damien Graham. I'm the Communications Director for the City of Raleigh. Appreciate the chance to talk to you. So my intent this afternoon is to give you some background information. So as you mull over the decision about how communications can support the CACs, it's important to know what your communications department is doing for you currently. So forgive the Brady Bunch-like appearance of our team, but this is your communications department. Hardworking, smart, creative folks who provide a host of services. And over the last 4 years, we've changed the nature. We used to be called the Public Affairs Department. Now we're the Communications Department. And we have reformed ourselves as an internal communications agency that provides marketing and communication support for the 21 different businesses or departments and offices throughout the city organization. And the services we provide range from media relations, strategy, graphic and digital design, video production, social media, web content creation and management, print production, public records, and even mail. We handle the internal mail. So what I've done is create a couple slides that will give you some data points about, this is just a year's worth of work to give you a sense of what we've been up to. So I'll break it down into each category. When it comes to media, it shouldn't surprise you that we receive quite a bit of requests and inquiries from our media partners. Somewhere in the range of 15 to 20 a week. Last year it was over 1,000. We're not just responding to the media, we're also trying to push out content. And so we had roughly 140 different press releases, and that doesn't include the activities and our friends in public utilities and the police department. Sadly, as you know, sometimes we have big events, crisis, and that's where the communications department steps up and tries to play a significant role. And when those happen, sadly, we usually drop whatever we're doing and go all in. And so we've had a couple of those just in my short tenure. And additionally, we provide some training for those upper management folks who get the blessing of having to be in front of a camera from time to time. So speaking of video, we are currently recording the meeting that we're in right now, and just as we do this meeting, we support all council meetings, as well as some boards and commissions, and we cover roughly over 100 a year. We additionally create our own original programming, because you see down on bullet point number 4 or so, we have 4 different channels that we have to provide content for. So 4 channels, 24 hours a day, a lot of activity. We're also moving towards shorter content video to support our social media efforts, and we produced over 125 of those just last year. Speaking of which, social media, there's one of our great videos. That's Julia Milstead, she's our PIO. And she produces a weekly video that we push out that gives highlights of what's going on in the city of Raleigh that particular week. But what I wanted to highlight here for you is just to show you the 3 platforms that we focus on: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the growth we've experienced over the last year. Certainly you can see Facebook has grown significantly at 140%, Twitter at 7%, and then Instagram at 65%. Don't feel bad for Twitter, though. When we first brought in our social media manager about 3 years ago, the Twitter number of followers was around 29,000, 30,000, and here we are above 100,000. So there's been quite a bit of growth and a lot of effort to get that growth over the last couple of years. This slide just gives you a sense of how busy we are with social media. We're producing 3 to 5 posts a day for Facebook, 10 to 15 a day for Twitter, and then Instagram is a little less, just because of the design of that particular platform. While we're pushing out information, but we don't always get to stop at that. We are constantly having to respond, and in today's age of folks expecting instantaneous response, we've become a major portal for customer service. And so when folks have issues with whatever the department is, they often tweet at us. And so just to give you a snapshot, just last year we had roughly well over 700 customer responses just through social. And it's worth noting that all that activity is done by one person. Graphic and digital design, we are trying to actually move or not most, but a significant part of our communications through digital as opposed to printing the materials. So our folks our graphic artists are very busy. At any given time, we have over 100 projects in the active queue. Last year, we did 430 different design jobs, and it's a significant increase over the year before at 14%. So web content, it's gotten a little bit of a mention earlier. The website is divided into 2 different departments. The IT department handles the back end, the structure of the website, and your communications department handles the personality, the words and the language and the content. It's RaleighNC.gov is a significant site, as you might imagine. It's our #1 communications outlet. We are trying to cull it down and refine it. It was 2,400 pages. It's now down to 1,300. We had a bunch of documents, 30,000. We've moved that down to 20. But we are constantly updating it, and it gets over 100 different content additions per month. We also manage an internal website, so not quite the same in its size or scope, but it's not nothing either. I mean, it's CoreCon is our internal site. Just last month alone, it got 93,000 page views from our employees. But again, it's 855 pages, thousands of updates every year. So we're not doing all that. We also provide some podcasts for internal communications. We have a twice-a-week newsletter called The Loop. We handle public records requests, and that's a growing industry, I'll tell you. Just since Wednesday, we've had close to 20 different requests for public records, just since Wednesday. Today's Tuesday. So we had over 600 last year. And even though we are trying to drive design more towards the digital space, we do still have a lot of print materials, and we handle that print production, and that has an increase of 25% over last year at 1,650 jobs. So 2 more quick things. We have 2 very large projects that we are head over heels over. That's not really the right phrasing, but we are well in depth into it. So the website is one of them, the RaleighNC.gov. We are in the process of moving this website from this current platform, which is frankly held together with prayer and duct tape, to a new, better platform just this year. And I equate it to, if you've ever been blessed with having to move a senior adult out of their home that they've been in for 20 years into a smaller space, you know about all the culling that has to go through. What do you keep? What do you throw out? What do you donate? That's sort of what we're doing with this website. There are thousands, as you saw, thousands of pages we have to go through, thousands of documents, and assess what's important and what can we perhaps improve upon and move it to this new location. We're also redesigning it, and we're very excited about what that new look will look like. That will be public by the end of the year, and so that's a big project we're working on. The other is branding implementation. You hopefully saw a brand update in your manager's update just this last week. But I have 2 slides on this. One, this demonstrates just some of our sub-branding efforts. So how do we look at some of our public-facing departments and find ways to give them a unique look that still ties to our corporate entity or corporate visual ID. And so this is a case of public utilities, for example, where they are presenting themselves as Raleigh Water. And the other thing is we're rebranding everything in our new brand, and it's just overwhelming how many things need to be rebranded. So everything from vehicles to uniforms to tchotchkes that go to conventions. I mean, it's amazing how many different opportunities we have to rebrand, and so that's what we are well into and doing our best to keep up with the demand. So the question before you, though, is how can we provide communication support for our friends in the CACs? And it's a difficult question. If you've taken anything from my presentation, I hope you get a sense that our dance card is pretty full, but we want to be supportive. The sort of larger issue, though, is you have an outside independent bodies who want to very much be independent of the city, having access and use of the city resources and the city platforms. That's sort of the tension that we're struggling with. These are just some examples of some of the CAC handles that they have out on the internet. And I think I would argue that the strength of a CAC is its ability to represent the neighborhoods that compose that CAC, the uniqueness of that neighborhood, the uniqueness of that CAC. And so similar to the work that Dr. Caesar did, would we be better off leaning into keeping that uniqueness about each individual CAC rather than coming under a corporate structure, which is what that would require if they came under our platforms. If they're coming out on the city platform, it has to be more unified in its look. It's a representation of the city. It would be slowed down. It's, in essence, it's a zero-sum game. So if we want to produce some flyers at our community centers about what job opportunities exist, where does that, how do I balance that with the 5-Point CAC wanting to push out a festival that they're putting up together? Those are just priorities that we'd have to juggle with. But we want to be good partners, and so I don't want to just come up here and tell you that we're busy and we can't do it, because I truly appreciate what the CAs are trying to do. It's a difficult job to compete with everything else that we have before us. So if we kept the resources the same, in essence, we could do a couple things. One is, I talked about the new website, and I think that's a great opportunity. We could provide better representation of how CACs are represented on that website, to include posting all of their CAC meetings on the calendar, which will be greatly improved over what we currently have. Our calendar is kind of an issue with our website, and I think it's the solution we're looking at is a huge improvement. We could establish a Twitter handle just for CACs that would be managed by Housing and Neighborhoods, where each CAC could post their materials and give them an additional outlet, not just for their own particular Twitter handle, but they could put all their information. So for those folks who are wanting to keep up with a greater community activity, they could follow that particular handle. And then also we could produce, we would work closely with Housing and Neighborhoods to produce a video, hopefully that would have some evergreen status to it. It could live for a while, and that is an educational video about what is a CAC. It could answer, how do I get to find out more about my particular CAC? It's just an educational, promotional thing that would live on our YouTube channel, it would live on our website, and it's certainly something that they could use, each individual CAC could use to promote and recruit their folks. And so that is the completion of my presentation, and I'm sure Linda and I would be happy to address any questions you have.
Thank you for the information and the feedback. What I'm hearing is the challenge is the CAC independence versus the city logo, in a sense, and how it's used in branding. How do we manage that independence with having this, you know, when something comes out under the city logo, it comes out with certain expectations and things and controls where you all go through and edit and make sure that before basically try to your best to make sure before it goes out that it is appropriate for under the city logo. Where from the CAC standpoint going out right now, they have control of their message and what goes out. And in order to come through the city from a Twitter, I'm mainly speaking of social media and Twitter or maybe Facebook, certain things would have to be approved first. So I'm thinking, and I'm going to open up for other counselors, is where do we find the balance? Because I think there can be some items that may fit, and there may be some that may not. But has there been a conversation between, based on what was presented today in the CACs about that? Has that occurred?
So the RCAC we have had conversations, Damien and I, about a year ago about how we use social media. And then that comes, the things that come into question there is public information, public records. If we start to store that information becomes public, but yet the city has to be responsible for that. Right. There again, it creates the challenge again in terms of capacity with staff and resources. So the conversation has evolved to where we are now. So it's still the same question in regards to how do we find that balance. Okay.
And then I noticed you had 6 individuals that are responsible for CACs plus other items and things that they're doing. So it sounds like there's a staffing, there could be a staffing issue on both sides. I don't manage the staff, so I don't know. I can't speak to that, but from the outside looking in, I see the challenges. I'm gonna open up for other counselors to kind of speak and provide thoughts and feedback, and hopefully before we leave here today, we'll have some type of direction that we're moving towards.
Yeah, I'd like to weigh in. My background is communications, as you know. I'm more than, I won't say how many years, but a lot of years doing communications, and I appreciate how much you have on your plate, and especially going through a rebranding. I know what that's like and what's involved in that, and it's a tremendous amount of work. And as social media grows and becomes more important, that changes the dynamic incredibly. But I think sometimes we tend to get a little too caught up in all the things that we're doing, and we don't necessarily do as good a job at partnering with folks. And I know there's some issues with the level of independence of the CACs and the city and all of that. But I think somehow we need to figure out how to work more closely with them. I mean, it's my understanding that the CAC leadership only found out about this presentation a day or two ago, and it was kind of in the context of trying to schedule their own presentation to the City Council. And it was oh, by the way, we're going to be presenting on this. And to me, that's the kind of, we need to focus more on that interpersonal communication, breaking down those barriers. Yeah, we've got to do websites, and we've got to do social media, and we've got to do print publications and all those other things. But I think we need to figure out how to talk to each other more so that we understand what each side needs, what each side wants. And then, of course, you can't always give everybody everything they want, but at least have the conversation and understand what's going to be possible. Also, you know, I've always been a strong champion of CACs, and I think it's really important that they're a big conduit to get us to our community and to establish the two-way dialogue and the engagement between the city and the community. And so, you know, I don't know exactly what the resources are like. I don't know how overworked or not people are, but maybe that's something we need to take a look at in terms of providing adequate resource, because I think that this is something that we really do need to prioritize and put a lot of focus on. And I'm not meaning to be critical of anybody. I'm just expressing what I'm seeing and from my background.
Thank you, and I received that information, but I would like to also let you know that RCAC was informed during their May meeting that this would be presented at the work session for June the 11th. But thank you I received that information.
I guess I'll chime in and say I absolutely support everything Councilor Mendel said. If there is a resource issue, I do consider the CACs important enough that I would say, if need be, deprioritize some of the branding efforts and branding implementation efforts and give more attention and more priority to the CAC needs. I'm interested in, I mean, we heard what you believe you can do and with the current allocation of resources in terms of you know, providing space on the website and Twitter handles and things like that. I'm very much interested in hearing, you know, and it goes back to what Councilor Mendel said, the interplay between between staff and the RCAC. I mean, really, the question in my mind is, what do they perceive are the needs that they have for communications? And so I understand now what you're in a position to be able to provide. I want to understand what it is they believe they need and understand what the gaps are.
I think that would be the question I have as well, is have you heard back from the RCAC about what their needs are based on the kind of, almost I would call them, I guess the communications plans that y'all shared during the retreat, so that we can figure out what are the goals and who is the target and where are we going with the message?
Thank you so much. I received that information, and that was the purpose of having the workshop, well, not the workshop, but the activity during their retreat, and giving them a template so that they could go through and create their goals and objectives, and how do we support that to hear exactly what they would like to list, where would we like to target. If we do it from a staff's lens, then we might not be inclusive of the community needs, because they are the ones in the community, and we're here to support them.
So has that information been provided back from the retreat on? Has anything been provided back from that?
So actually, after we had a debrief meeting, it was a little confusion in regards to staff should prepare the communications plan as opposed to RCAC preparing their communications plan so that we could help them carry out that information. And so then April the 2nd, the chair came to give you an update. And I think at that time, that's why we are here today, to give you the background of how staff, communications, and housing and neighborhoods have been trying to work with them in regards to helping with that communications.
Okay, I've got the, actually, looking at my notes over here. Just kidding. But that was I got from the presentation that trying to help the CACs develop their own communications plan and a CAC leadership guide. And
yes,
but I found myself wanting to ask you to give some examples of what are the top communication support items that you heard from the CACs as you've been working through this plan development.
Yes, so when we were at the retreat, and Dr. Caesar, if you're still here, she may be able to help because she facilitated that discussion. And so we actually prioritized what is your top, I think it was 3 or 5 issues that you see happening in your CAC. And then they were ranked. I mean, it was like affordable housing, workforce, And I do have the minutes from that I would be happy to share from the council, so I understand your question.
But in terms of communication support, if that's what this topic is generally, is CAC communication support, what are the top few items that they said, we'd love to see this get into a communications plan?
Yeah, because there seems to be some confusion. I think the CAC folks thought that communications was going to create a communications plan for them, and I guess you didn't have that same understanding. So again, I think it's a question of needing to get everybody together at the table and really understand and, you know, walk away with a common understanding of what's going to happen.
Okay, but I still want to, regardless of, you know, whether you're going to provide a template and then they're going to take it from there or whatever, what were the top communication support items that came out during that conversation?
From my experience, so I was brought in to facilitate the retreat very early on. I think I had been with the city for like 2 days at that point.
Right.
I did provide a template on really coming up with what's your catchphrase and how are you going to attract folks in. The main need that the RCAC members requested was, how do we get members in? How do we communicate that we're here? And how do we get that message out there? And then how do we share the different events and activities that we want to do? So I think that's my takeaway from the experience, is that RCAC wanted to have a better way to have visibility.
Okay, and that sounds like what I've heard too, is
real quick,
track members,
slide
distribute information.
this way real quick. I'm going to ask a very quick question, just yes or no, because we have leadership here from the RCAC. If what are you asking, is what you're looking for is a communication plan on how to communicate about CACs, or to share what's happening in your meetings? Because there's two different approaches.
Share what CACs are and how we can be beneficial to the community, because
Okay.
people do not understand that we exist and we are a vital resource.
Okay.
That was the basis of
Okay.
Okay.
So may I continue speaking, because I know that's a good question. So the point of it is, it's not necessarily what's going on in the individual CACs from month to month, because that does vary, but it's just to say we are here, this is what we do, this is what we need, this is how we can help.
Okay.
A general overview of what CACs are and what the RCAC is and the benefits.
Okay, and me hearing that, and other council members, and I'm bringing it back to the council, can chime in. We have a page that lists our CACs. Can we revamp that? And the reason why I'm saying that is because I know you're in the process of revamping the website now.
Yes.
And right now, I know if I go to the website, there's a link that actually tells you a purpose of CACs. It tells you where the CACs meet, when, and it tells you who's the chair, and you can click on it and you can email that person. Can we work on making sure that the purpose there is current? Because based on what I just heard, that's my understanding of what's the CAC, when they meet, and why they're here.
Yeah, and their agendas are on there too, but right now the agendas are PDF files, so you got to download them and
Right.
look at them. It would be nice if you could just click on a link and bring the page up.
So if that can be the low-hanging fruit for now, and then the next phase, I think, is is a more of a storage issue, because I think there's been conversations about video and live streaming CACs. I think that, I know there's some equipment that was ordered that they can use for their CAC meetings. If we can just, incorporate however way that is, but also keep in mind that in doing so, there are certain policies that the city has, that our city attorney's office is well informed as far as the content. And there may be some things that may happen at certain CACs from time to time that may not qualify to be posted. And I think we just need to make sure that that's vetted properly. Is that too big of a lift? I'm leaning this way because at the end of the day, I know I'm asking you, but at the end of the day, you're our city manager, and I would like to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think there's two different questions regarding resourcing and current and overview versus content management. And I think that's where we end up with the tensions and the miscommunications. And so it kind of goes back to that. So the words that you're asking, you're framing the question around you can post certain things and some things you can't. That filtering process, that decision making, is where we can have a conflict.
Right.
So if the resourcing issue, as Damien indicated, what are the things we can currently do? We can update the website. We can create a Twitter handle, you know, that's already up here. We can do a better job of communicating what's there today. In other words, the agenda is the agenda. That's not a, that doesn't require interpretation. When you get below just the current, when's the meeting, what's the agenda, et cetera, and you start getting into the content management, that's where we start to, that's where you're hearing some of the tension, and that would require more time. So I do think what the staff is trying to do is look at a list of things we can do to improve at the overview level. Right. What's a video? What is a CAC promoting? How is that valuable? Where do you go to find more information? Without trying to, quote, get in the business of managing the activities of the individual CAC. Yeah. That's
I think eventually we want to move into being able to provide more content, but certainly I think at this stage we need to deal with what Councilor Branch says is the low-hanging fruit. And I think if we can get some improvements to the website, and then I'm interested in hearing more from the RCAC, because there have been talk about things like when the utility bills go out, that maybe we can have some mention of the CACs in there as well. But hopefully without incurring any additional cost, and certainly focus on the low-hanging fruit, and then longer term develop a game plan for how we use the video equipment that we've purchased. Maybe it's just a simple matter of being able to help them set up the equipment and being able to stream it out to perhaps Facebook or YouTube or something like that.
Yeah, I think too, just taking advantage of whatever communications channels we already have. If there's a weekly, we do a weekly video, if there's something hot happening at one of the CACs, include a sentence about that.
Right.
There are lots of, I think, opportunities where we can just fold them into our because I think making our community more aware of the existence and the opportunity to participate is really key.
Yeah, right. And I think bullets 1 and 3, I'll say that's the low-hanging fruit. If we can focus on 1 and 3 right now, and then through conversation, we can work on how we're moving forward. I think, overall, what I'm hearing is both sides want to work together. It's just that no one has clearly defined what that is and what that means. And whatever I can do to help, I'm willing to do to help navigate that. So.
And I am too, so.
We have we have 18 CACs, and we probably have 100 volunteers. It's a tremendous resource, and I encourage you to work together with them to take advantage of that.
So just to let you know, you're not in this by yourself. Anything else?
No.
Yeah.
I see your face, but I hear nothing.
Oh. Well, now. I'm comfortable with either 1 and 3 or what y'all have laid out as next steps without additional resources. I do say there's a bit of hesitation for myself in providing prioritizing and providing city resources to CACs. What I want to see is, does this work? Does this work in getting additional folks out to meetings? And if it doesn't, then we need to stop and kind of refigure how do we get additional folks out to CACs, if that's the goal, instead of dumping more staff communication resources into what we think might get there. So I want to kind of add that caveat to, let's try some of these things.
Right.
See if it meets our goal, and if it doesn't, then let's come back and have another conversation. But I think that's what I want to add.
All right. Anything else from anyone? We are adjourned.
Thank you.